Hello everyone, it's me, Spear. Welcome back to the channel. I have for you today something special. It's a comprehensive guide on all the viable and best defenders for the new and upcoming FPL 2023-2024 season. For those new here, you can see an introduction to my rank history on the bottom left. You don't care about that though. You care about all those quality defenders up for grabs. Without further ado, let's get into it. First of all, points for defenders brought to you by Yapstam. In terms of changes, there's no actual points changes, only to the BPS or bonus point scoring system. The players now get extra BPS for being fouled, for shooting on target, for clearing off the line, and now also negative points for conceding as well. You can see those in yellow. As I said, standard point scoring remains the same for defenders. A few things of note would be that defenders get a lot more for scoring goals. They get the same as everybody else for assists, and they get 4 points for a clean sheet, plus they accrue negative points based upon how many goals they concede as well. First up is the 4 million options. I've highlighted in green my picks of the bunch from each team. As things stand, every player on here should be starting somewhat. First of all, Barcode. Estupinian, the left back for Brighton, is out for around 1 to 2 months. He had a really bad injury. He's needed 2 operations to repair a ruptured cruciate knee ligament and meniscus cartilage damage as well. So Barco, the Argentinian, should be playing left back there until he returns in maybe 6 to 8 weeks time. No one really knows the return date. Barco's also been heavily involved with set pieces in the preseason as well. And it should be his to lose until Estupinian comes back, that left back spot for Brighton, but there are others that can play there too, so he's not completely nailed, especially under their new 31-year-old manager. Next up on the list is Ipswich's new signing from my home city, which you've seen me wear the shirt of, as you can see him there just above me, is Greaves, who they signed from Hull City. He has really decent goal involvement actually, and as you can see there, he's really converted it too. I will mention that he did get booked 12 times for the Tigers last year, but he is my pick for Ipswich if you can't stretch to Leif Davis, of course, and if their fixtures cover your backline well when you need them. For Southampton, those of you already gone for Howard Bellis, he's by far and away the best option there. I would say he's the best of any of the backline for Southampton because there's no need to pay the extra 0.5 for anyone else there, unless you want their keeper, of course. He has really decent involvement in terms of goals and assists for the Saints, and I would certainly opt for him over Bednarek if you want a fill-in Southampton defender. Finally, there's not that much between... Oh, didn't mean to do that. There's not that much between the free Leicester City defenders there. Okoli is new and inexperienced and he isn't guaranteed minutes. Vestergaard might have more minutes than Okoli, but he requires a specific system and formation around him to play every week because he's very slow. So Wout Faes for me is easily the best option of the Leicester lot, and that's who you should go for if you want a Leicester 4.0. If you want high upside in the best team of the list by far, then obviously go for Barco. Especially if you're playing your wildcard early or mid-term, there's no reason really not to go for him over the others, unless you want a rotation with someone like Howard Bellis. There's one person that is on the list for another side, and that is Mosquera for Wolves, who will likely start for them at 4 million, but they have horrific fixtures, and he isn't as nailed as anyone on the list. Maybe a bit more nailed than Okoli, but I wouldn't go there personally, but he's just worth mentioning. He might pop up in the future. If you want longevity and guaranteed minutes, then I'd pick any of Greaves, Howard Bellis, and Faes. If fixtures don't matter, then to summarise, Greaves and Howard Bellis do carry more threat in isolation than Faes, but Faes arguably plays for the better side of the three. Personally, if I was you, I would just check the fixtures in the upcoming slides I'm about to show you, or the upcoming video I'm about to show you. and see where you need a fill-in. Okay, I would recommend only going with one 4 million defender for flexibility, unless you start with 3 premiums, in which case you could probably reach the 2 4.0s if you really want to. But your fourth defender being a 4.5 really helps you with pricing structure, with depth, and with flexibility down the line. I do think Barco is the best option here by far, but he's also the least nailed, other than maybe a Coley on this list, so that is a bit of a warning from me for Barco. Okay. This one here is going to be very interesting, and it really is a treasure trove this year at 4.5 million for the defenders, much like with the keepers. We'll go through stats first, then we'll get into fixtures. Leif Davis, great name, holds the record for most assists by a defender in the championship, which he broke last year with 18 assists. Incredible. He tops the XGI list by far in terms of expected goal involvement and goal involvement. 8 Nori, sorry. RIN 8 Nori is next, and you can see he boasts really impressive stats and occasionally gets games at left wing. He at the very least normally plays left wing back in a back 5. Then we have a bit of a step down-ish, I would say personally, in my opinion, to Dan Burn, who has nice stats for Newcastle and has been priced very kindly. I will talk about the other options at Newcastle later. Anthony Robinson, the American, falls into a similar category to Big Dan Burn, arguably in a slightly worse defence, but potentially more marauding if Dan Burn does start centre-back instead of left-back. Again, some nice attacking stats. Then we have kind of a step down after those 4 there. Everyone from kind of Anderson up to Murillo kind of has similar XGI stats. Anderson's priced really, really nicely. He does have competition from Munoz at 5 million, who's a great pick though, and also his keeper Henderson as well at 4.5. Gay, who also plays for Palace, I don't like as much as the Anderson pick if Gay stays at Palace, but if Gay moves to Liverpool, then he would definitely make this list and be a huge, huge asset to own if he does make that move after this video is posted. Pinnock is a lovely pick, and he's actually really lowly owned right now, with great goal threat, ability to finish those chances as well. He's proven he has. Collins is another option there as well, but with very similar stats to Pinnock. They both played about the same amount of minutes and have similar threat, but I'd say Pinnock has a bit more prowess to him when it comes to actually finishing the chances. Ezri Konsa may be the gem of the entire 4.5 list and to start the season. He was the most... To my knowledge, he was the most fouled defender, or at least one of the most fouled defenders last season, and will benefit from that massively when it comes to the BPS rule. Villa's defense is strong. Emery's a great manager. Up next, we also have a very kindly priced player in Mikolenko for Dyche's Everton. Lovely expected goals conceded stats there for him, and a cheaper pick than Pickford as well. And the other defenders like Branthwaite and Tarkovsky, and much more nailed than someone like Coleman. Next on the list is someone that you could maybe, if Gay moved to Liverpool, Konsa would fall off the list, but Quansah, sorry, makes this list only if Liverpool sign no more centre-backs. He's actually been off the table in terms of people wanting to buy him from Liverpool. I do see him as a future starting centre-back for Liverpool. Konate is still relatively young though, and gets into the France squad, so it's really a toss-up between them as to who will start. Quansah, I think, started something like 10 of the last 12 for Liverpool last season, but under a different manager, of course, in Klopp. And if you go and look, he actually scored 2 in the last 2 for Liverpool at the end of last season. He's also started every preseason game so far as of the recording of this video. So at 4.5, I feel like if you have a lot of depth, he is worth the risk if Liverpool don't sign anyone. However, if Konate starts to see loads of minutes in preseason, Quansah gets dropped in preseason, or they sign someone, then obviously you would fall off the list massively. He's by far and away the biggest risk, but has the biggest upside, I would say, of everyone on the list to start the season at least. He's a wait and see. Murillo, not the most exciting pick. As you can see, he props up the rest of that sort of contingency of players there in that sort of 0.08 to 0.1 range of XGI. Not the most exciting pick, as I said, but played, I think, second or third most minutes for outfield players for Nottingham Forest last season and boasted interest from bigger clubs because he played so well. Great fixtures, much more nailed than trying to guess the Forest keeper situation, which is still up in the air. It could be Sells, it could be Miguel. Yeah, and they have, I'll talk about fixtures later though. The last two on here, Van de Ven and Martinez, carry almost no threat and no goal involvement. Really worth writing home about. I do think that Van de Ven is interesting considering the fixtures that they do have, which we'll talk about in a second, and his ability to convert chances from very little. But I don't expect any attacking returns from these two. You're basically picking Van de Ven and Martinez if you want a Spurs or Man United asset that's very cheap. They're definitely better than Onana and Vicario at 0.5 cheaper, but don't expect any attacking returns from all season, really. If they stay fit, maybe they'll get 1 or 2, but it'd be surprising if they got more than that. You're picking them for clean sheets and the teams they play for. Sorry, still suffering from COVID. So, this is my sort of other options within that 4.5 bracket from the same teams. If you're not seeing players on here, you know, maybe Zabani for Bournemouth or something like that, or Disasi, sorry, not Disasi, is it Badiashile or Disasi? Or Colwill. Again, we don't really know who's going to start for Chelsea, hence why they're not on here. The Bournemouth lot aren't on here because they have bad fixtures and carry almost no threat. So there will be players that you'll be able to pick and they'll play 90 minutes, but there's either too much risk of rotation in combination with bad fixtures in the case of Chelsea's backline, considering you can just get Sanchez for 4.5, and in the other cases, they just don't play for the best teams and don't have good fixtures. With Bournemouth, so they haven't made the cut. I don't think you should consider those players for now. This one though does have alternatives. If you just fancy those players to do well, maybe you think, oh, with the eye test, you know that they look better than their stats suggest, and I've put them on here for you. Dunk is obviously, I would say, much more nailed and much more goal threat than Barco, but he's 0.5 more. Remember, so I would start with Barco, but Dunk is there. Just in case you want to check the stats out. Murillo and Williams, I know Williams has better stats, but Williams has a lot more threat for his position, and he's not as nailed as everyone seems to think he is, the Nottingham Forest fullback. So he is much bigger risk. So I wouldn't go there personally. I've seen other people on Twitter, etc., go there. I wouldn't personally. I would just stick with Murillo and don't worry about it. Even Milenkovic, the Serbian centre-back, is more nailed than Williams, I would say, because they have a lot of full-backs that can play in different positions. Even the starting left-back, Aina, can take Williams' position on the other side. Fulham's, though, are, again, very viable. I'd say of the three we've talked about so far, it's very viable to go with Castagne instead, who has very similar stats, but I do think Robinson has more about him going forward. Castagne does like to attack, though, and has a history of doing well attacking-wise in the Premier League. I think it's personal preference there. If you want me to decide for you, I'd say go with Robinson. Next up, we have the Newcastle lot, and Burn does top the stats in terms of minutes and XGI. Burn has the benefit of being able to play centre-back or left-back. He's captain in the side in pre-season. He's much bigger set-piece threat than the other two, so hence why I personally think he's the better pick right now, but things could change in the transfer market. If Trippier is sold, then that means that likely Livramento steps in at right-back, and that Hall has less threat from Livramento at left-back, and Burn slots into centre-back. Obviously, any of the other centre-backs coming back, like Botman or Kelly playing over Burn, could pose some threat to Hall and even to Burn himself. Do watch the transfer market when it comes to Newcastle and basically pick from the three based upon who's the safest minutes, in my opinion. So if we do find that Trippier is sold, I would probably go for Livramento. If he's not sold, I would probably go for Burn. If they make sales at centre-back and left-back, then Hall, for me, would be the best pick. So it really depends upon who they sell. Right now, for me, it's just Burn. But I think you can't really go wrong there as long as you are smart around your expected minutes for them. Next up, we have Brentford. I already spoke about Collins, but I do think that Pinnock's slightly better. I suppose he could make this list too, but his XGI is very slightly worse, and his conversion rate's very slightly worse than Pinnock. With Ben Mee back, I also think that Pinnock is slightly safer for me. Likely they might even play a back five. If they do play a back five and regularly do so, then Rico Henry, who's on this list right now, has really nice stats when they play a back five. When they play a back four, I would prefer Pinnock, but if they are playing back fives in pre-season, Rico Henry's a very interesting pick too, but he did suffer a bad injury last season. Last on the list is the West Ham lot. Again, it's just personal preference. Emerson carries more goal threat, but Kufal got some really handy assists last season and did really well in terms of actual goal involvement. Again, it's more a rotation pair, that one. I really wouldn't bother with the West Ham defence considering the other options, but they are there just to show you the stats. Fixtures then. I'm not really going to talk too much about fixtures. More so, this is for your benefit to pause it and then have a look for yourself. I will summarize it a little bit, but feel free to pause this and have a look at your team or where you need coverage, rotation, etc. Again, I might release a rotation video. What I will say is don't bother with Ipswich or Wolves defence to start the season. As big of a fan of Leif Davis and Aït-Nouri I am, you just can't pick them because the fixtures are horrible. Wolves have Arsenal, Chelsea, Newcastle, Villa, Liverpool and Man City in the first 8. So only 2 decent fixtures and they're both away from home. Leif Davis, Liverpool and Man City in the first 2. Again, not great. I suppose you could rotate him if you wish, so he's maybe more viable. But he plays for a newly promoted side, which kind of skews him away from the quality of the other players, or at least the teams. After these two, you really have a lot of good fixtures in there. I would say, in my opinion, the best fixtures there are Robinson's for Fulham, Burns for Newcastle, Pinnock's for Brentford, Mikolenko's for Everton, Quansah's for Liverpool, if he starts playing, Murillo's for Nottingham Forest, and Van der Ven's for Spurs, especially if you can rotate him. Martinez for United, Quansah for Aston Villa, and Anderson for Palace, I think are really good picks if you can rotate them, because they have very, like, you know, the fixtures, they massively vary in terms of quality. I mean, the same could be said for Pinnock, really, but if you look at Pinnock's home fixtures, they're incredible, and then his away fixtures are terrible. So certain ones here where you'd want to maybe rotate them, like Pinnock, Martinez, Quansah, Anderson. Other ones you might not need to rotate them much at all, like Robinson, Burn, Mikolenko, Quansah if he starts, Murillo, for example. Okay? But you can kind of think about your rotations by even just looking at this right now. This next screen here, I'm not going to spend long on again, because what I've just done is added the 4.0 stats to the 4.5 defenders as well. So I've just put that on one screen for you, so you can take your time and have a look at that if you really want to. As you can see, most of them very similar. Face has really poor stats, really. Barco has really nice stats. Yeah, and you can just see where the 4.0s kind of slot in. Do remember that with expected goals conceded for Ipswich, Southampton, and Leicester City, we expect those to be some of the worst in the league because they're newly promoted sides. This, again, not going to spend too much time on because I've just added the 4.0s to the 4.5 fixture list as well. So you can see Barco, Greaves, Howard, Bellis, and Face have all been added there. So you can kind of work out if you have a red fixture for your second and third defender, you can see where you might need cover from a 4 million, etc. Okay? So again, maybe a screen to come back and pause and have a look for yourself. But don't pause just yet, because we have the 5 million defenders to look through. And I think this is the worst price bracket of the lot. I think 4.5 million and even 4 million is a better bracket than this, just in terms of value and flexibility, because there's such a small amount of 5 million options. Straight off the bat, I would say I've only put Dalot on there because I know United are a very popular team in fantasy football. They always are. So just to show you where Dalot stands as a 5 million asset, I'd rather just have Martinez for United. Dalot stats aren't the best, especially for 5 million. I just wouldn't bother there. So I've just put him on there for information for you and just to show you that it's probably not worth going there. Gusto, great stats and great output as well on top of the stats. But those fixtures in the first 2, I wouldn't really want to play a Chelsea defender in the first 2. Man City at home, Wolves away. Chelsea don't like playing Wolves. he's a wait and see for me. Plus, with Reece James coming back after 3 or 4 games, I can't remember how many games it is, but he's suspended right now. He could also threaten his minutes. But if Gusto does nail down that side, then he is a great pick in the future. So that's why I've put him in here, just in case people are watching in the future for this one. I wouldn't bother with Gusto. Maatsen suffers from a similar issue to Gusto in that Maatsen, there's actually 2 other players that can, and they're good players that can play in his position, Digne and Moreno. So it's pretty rough going, you know, in terms of expected minutes. On the other side, Konsa and Cash can play right back. Yeah, it's just not great in terms of expected minutes, but I know he's a popular pick, so I wanted to show you his expected goal involvement, generally speaking, and it's actually pretty good. But those 3, Gusto, Maatsen, and Dalot, I wouldn't bother with. Gusto will become a rotation issue and has bad starting fixtures. Maatsen, too many worries about minutes, and Dalot, stinky pick. There's just not enough to back up the extra 0.5 versus Martinez. The other 2 here, though, are your only, in my opinion, the only viable 5 million picks in the entire game. Which I know is a bold statement, but I think that's the case. Udogie has significantly better goal involvement than anything Van de Ven can muster for Spurs. So if you can find an extra 0.5, I think he's an awesome pick, Udogie. Munoz is mightily impressive. I know the stats don't look incredible, but not only has he done well for Palace, he also did well in the Copa America for Colombia. I actually played the Copa America fan team, fantasy football, and he did really well in that as well. And he will be playing right wing back. Those are both great picks. If you can get that extra 0.5 over Van de Ven and over Anderson, they are worth it. But if not, Van de Ven and Anderson are still nice picks. Okay. And here are the premiums then. So I'm sure this is a section which a lot of you were waiting for. Trent Alexander-Arnold, if Price was no object, he'd be in my team, and I'm sure he'd be in everybody's team. Always has the best expected goal involvement for defenders, and has a well, we'll talk about fixtures later, but he has really good fixtures to start off things. Robertson, though, had better output last year and actually had similar XGI as well. And he's $1 million less. So he's a very interesting pick, but Tsimikas playing the left-back role for Liverpool in pre-season has been a bit more inverted and not got forward as much. Trent viably could play in midfield and could play more advanced. That's not to say that Robertson won't play advanced from left-back, but just some odd observations I've seen. Right now, I would favour Robertson because that extra $1 million goes a long way. But if money was no object, I would go with Trent. So that's why the ones in green are the ones I prefer right now. But if money was no object, I'd obviously go for Trent Alexander-Arnold. If you can get one or both of those picks in your team, that's great. But they cost a lot of money. And with a lot of 4.5 value in the 4.5 range, it's rough paying $2.5 million extra for Trent Alexander-Arnold with a new manager. Next up on the list is one of my favourite picks from last season, and I think he'll continue his good form. He's actually had 2 goals in pre-season, including an absolute scorcher against Bayern Munich today as of the recording of this video, is Pedro Porro. And Pedro Porro not only has the stats, but he has the quality as well. I think if Maddison gets less minutes and they don't bring in another set-piece taker, it'll be even more of a threat because he'll be on more set-pieces. Maybe Big Ange will just allow him to have more set pieces because of the quality he's produced. I think he's a phenomenal pick and 2 great fixtures to start with. My only issue with Porro is after the first 2 fixtures, it's pretty stinky after that. And Spurs haven't been keeping clean sheets in pre-season, so you're kind of relying on him for his goal output. Next up, we have, I'll talk about both of them at the same time, is Vardiol and Walker. First of all, Walker, I just don't think you need to bother with him. For an extra $500,000, to me, you get someone who's very slightly, potentially more nailed, in my opinion, and has double the expected goal involvement, and is just miles better going forward. Vardiol, for me, he's been in my draft since the start of FPL being released this year. I think he's a phenomenal pick. My only gripe with Vardiol, aside from him being expensive, but he should be, is that first fixture away at Stamford Bridge. I do think Chelsea might nick a goal, so if you can maybe bench him in the first fixture, that's fine. But, I mean, playing the Man City defender every week is also very beneficial too. So, that's the only downside to Vardiol. And again, playing him is also fine. You always worry for benching a 15-pointer with Vardiol, which I think I did last season, so maybe I should just play him. Again, I wouldn't worry about Walker. not for me. I wouldn't bother. I just put him there to show you his stats. Next up is Ben White and Saliba. Again, to start the season at least, these are the only picks from that Arsenal back 4 or 5 to start the season, because at left back it could be anyone, and at left centre back even there's 3 different people that can play left centre back, and there's 3 that could play left back. Is it 3 or maybe even 4? Thinking about it, could play left back for Arsenal. So that's just completely off the table. So that leaves Saliba and White. Obviously Raya as well is a decent pick, but Saliba and White. Saliba has very poor expected goal involvement, as you can see, and White has a pretty decent one for extra 0.5, and will be playing advanced for one of the best teams in the league. So Ben White is definitely the better pick and is worth the extra 0.5. So I wouldn't bother with Walker and Saliba. Trent isn't highlighted, but I would bother with him if you can reach there. So basically the top 5 here are the ones to consider. Any others, you know, like your Van Dijks, Gabriel, they're just not worth the price that they've been put at. On to my picks then. So out of everything you've seen today, you could maybe just skip to this one, but don't. Make sure you watch the whole video. These are my picks that I think are the standouts. I've already highlighted my favorite 4.0s. My favorite 4.0 is Barco. And then after that, it's basically whoever you think would fit your fixtures for the rest of your defenders. So I haven't put any 4.0s in here. These are my favorites from every price point, basically. I would, on the next slide as well, you'll see alternatives for their teams at that price point too. But these are basically my favorite picks. So we've got Trent and Robertson. Again, I would say Vardiol. It's a really difficult to pick between Vardiol and Robertson, because Robertson has much better double fixture to start. Oh, sorry, first fixture to start, and has really nice stats, better than Vardiol's. But Vardiol plays for a better team, and you know, Guardiola is settled there versus Slot not being settled at Man City. So it's a very Liverpool. So it's a very difficult decision to make between one of those two. You could have both, but those 3 are easily the best. Porro is, to me, maybe the second, maybe this 3rd best pick for those first 2 fixtures. He has really good first 2 fixtures. I just worry about that Spurs defense. And then we have loads of 4.5s here, and a lot of these you can actually go up. So for example, one of these you can go up with price, and that's Anderson versus Munoz. I do think Munoz is a quality pick. I just worry that you're probably going to be benching him when you need to, because Palace aren't going to keep clean sheets like Arsenal, etc. So the rest of the 4.5s here I think are really, really strong picks. Robinson has incredible fixtures. Yeah, I've already kind of talked about all these, but these are my favorite 4.5s at the bottom as well. Speaking of fixtures, I just want to go into that really quick. As you can see, Liverpool have absolutely incredible fixtures. So 4 of the first 5 are really good. Man United away is a bit rough. I know people will take the mickey and say it's United is an easy fixture, but a new Liverpool manager going to Old Trafford with a team where the best players for Liverpool are in more of the twilight stages of their career rather than their prime. You know, in Salah, Van Dijk, Alisson. It's a difficult one. It's a difficult fixture to call, basically. But the other 4 fixtures are incredible. So that's why I really understand people tripling up on Liverpool. Vardiol, as you can see, 3 great fixtures of the first 4. The issue is that first away fixture. Next up, I've basically put all 3 in here. So Van de Ven, if you're being really cheap. The Doggy's definitely worth the extra money, as is Porro. So I've kind of put them in order there, with Porro being my favourite. As you can see, 3 and 4 for them are very poor fixtures, though I don't see a clean sheet at St James's Park or at the Emirates for Spurs. Or against Arsenal at the Spurs Stadium. Robinson, if you can get away with benching him the first game week, you'd probably play him the next 5 after that. So really, really interesting pick. Dan Burn, you could probably play him most weeks. Up until game week 6, although game week 3 is not great. Munoz and Anderson, if you can stretch the Munoz, he looks fantastic. He looks really, really good. Anderson is also a great pick too, so don't worry if you can't stretch that. But again, you'd probably want to rotate him a little. Really good game week 2 and game week 4 fixtures, but slightly dodgy ones around that. Pinnock has the most sporadic of fixtures, the most polarizing of fixtures, should I say. So Palace at home, Liverpool away. Southampton at home, Man City, Tottenham away. West Ham and Wolves at home, Man United away. Ipswich at home. He's really one way. If you are rotating, I would have him in your team. If you're not rotating, kind of rough to have as a third defender with no rotation. So maybe if you are going that way, maybe you look at your 4.0s that could rotate out for him. Konsa, as you can see, much like with Leif Davis, Konsa has trash first 2 fixtures. I don't see Villa to keeping a clean sheet at West Ham's ground. It's a really difficult place to go, or against Arsenal. But then he has Leicester, Everton, Wolves, Ipswich, Man United at home, Fulham away, Bournemouth at home. So again, if you can hold him on your bench for those first 2, really good pick. Mykolenko, another one of my favourites here. Does fixtures: Brighton at home, Tottenham away bench, Bournemouth at home, Villa away bench, Leicester, Palace at home, Newcastle at home, Ipswich away, Fulham at home, Southampton away. 0.5 cheaper than Pickford, playing for Dyche, decent goal involvement. Nothing much not to like there. And then finally Murillo, if you need someone who's you're just going to hammer for the first 3 fixtures and be playing, Murillo's a really good pick. But then you will need to rotate him out, I think, for that game week 4, 5, and 7. That's all. But again, his 6, 8 to 9, so 8, 9, and 10 are really good. Okay. But even though I realised that on this slide, for example, we don't see Munoz, we don't see Udogie, I do think those are prime picks. It's just a case of budget, really. If you can stretch the Munoz from Anderson, he's worth it. Okay. My final thoughts then before we finish the video. Look, again, much like what I said with goalkeepers, make sure you look at defensive team stats. So when you go and look through my data I've just shown you, go and look at expected goals against for those teams. And remember that if it's a promoted side, those will be massively inflated stats. So maybe add an extra 0.5 onto them, right? So if it's a 0.1 something, 1.1 for Leicester, it's probably more likely going to be a 1.7 at the end of the season. But for the rest of them, it's really interesting to look at to see what their expected goals, conceded goals against are, and then also see what their fixtures are. That's the best combination, I would say. Obviously, the premium picks carry a premium price because of their attacking prowess as well as the teams they play for. Fixtures really matter a lot for clean sheets, and that's the bread and butter for defenders. As those prices begin to rise for defenders, that's where individual stats kind of matter more. As you saw with the 4.5 defenders, the stats are very similar, but as you go to 5, 5.5, 6 plus, expected goal involvement really starts to rise, but the price does too. If picking a 4 million defender, pick one that fits your fixtures. The only viable way to have 2 4 millions is if you have 2 or 3 premiums in defense, or 2 premiums and then 1 4.5 or 5 that you back up with the 2 4 millions fixtures. Rotation pairs and trios look really good. As I said, if you want to see me do a rotation pairs video for defenders, I'll do that separately because we're already at 30 minutes now. I've already been working on my own data for that, and I'd love to share it, but I'm not going to spend time producing the video and recording and everything if there's no interest in that sort of thing. So if we get to maybe 100 plus likes and we get some comments about it, I'll consider doing a video for that. Do compare prices versus keepers. So there's some great price points. For example, Van de Ven and Martinez are 4.5 versus Vicario and Onana. Same with Mykolenko versus Pickford. So there's some really nice picks there. You do kind of want to aim at 3 strong fixtures every week. The one exception to that is a 5.5 million defender and up. You can kind of just play him every week. But for the rest of them, you kind of want to be rotating to make sure you have 3 strong fixtures every week. I wouldn't recommend benching or rotating premiums, and that's the issue with the 5 millions, is that you're always worried about benching in a bad fixture versus them getting points in it. Pick what fits your structure for defense. You know, if you're going with just one of Haaland or Salah, you can probably afford loads of decent picks at the back. If you're going with both, it's going to be tough to have more than one premium. Ultimately, pick defenders from the team or teams you think will perform the best at the start of the season in terms of defensive strength. Look at the fixtures, look at the price points. Expected goal involvement is important too. Another little note is that of the expected goal involvement, I've also put in the expected goals, which are worth a lot more. If you see them weighting more towards that, that's also a good pick as well. that's it from me. If you want to help my videos out, if you want to help the channel grow, if you want to chat amongst our community, etc., feel free to leave some comments in the bottom. Sharing the video, liking the video really helps me out. Upcoming will be midfielders eventually, but I might even take longer than the defenders video. And yeah, make sure you're subscribed, notifications on, so you can see that video come up in your YouTube feed. I do FPL and football videos on here. I also stream on Twitch. I'm also on Twitter and throne.com/speardrops if you want to buy me a little something as well. But those are all my socials. Looking forward to the midfield video. It's going to take me a while to produce. And again, I'll do a little bonus defensive rotation video if there's interest. Well, see you in the next video. I enjoyed doing this one, but it took a long time. I enjoyed it. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye, everybody.